Well, good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for your company. 11:24. It's just coming up to you here at Talk, the home of common sense. Well, let's talk some common sense right now with Helen Joyce. She's the author of Transgender Identity and the New Battle for Women's Rights. She's also director of advocacy at the campaign group Sex Matters and joins us right now to talk about, well, the latest pledge we've got from the Tories if to win the next general election. They're completely apparently unaware they've been in power the last 14 years to shake up the Equality Act. Good morning to you, Helen.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. And I'm sure a lot of us who've been campaigning on this side of this debate will welcome this news. Kemi Badenoch, who has been a great ally on this, who's also Women's Equalities Minister as well as being a Cabinet Minister, has vowed to change the Equality Act to ensure biological sex is the protected characteristic rather than legal sex. But how has this come about? And when did you first identify that this was an issue that needed clarifying, as the Minister says?
Well, as soon as I started looking into this whole issue back in 2017, I realised that the Gender Recognition Act, which is the thing that allows you to get a piece of paper that says for some purposes you've actually changed sex, of course, that's a legal fiction. How did that feed into the Equality Act? So as soon as somebody looks at those two acts, you ask yourself whether the Gender Recognition Act is like a spanner in the works for the Equality Act, which has 9 protected characteristics, one of which is sex, or whether the Gender Recognition Act doesn't apply. It's important to say this is only, less than 10,000 people have ever had a gender recognition certificate. So this isn't about,
Yeah.
people who identify as trans generally.
Yeah.
They're protected under a different protected characteristic, namely gender reassignment. So what this is about in a nutshell is actually about men and women, not about trans
Yeah.
people at all. It's about whether you can have a single sex service or not, a genuinely single sex service.
And this isn't about whether or not, you can have your members of the Garrick Club if you're a woman, things like that. We're talking about really important concerns about safety. We're talking about being in a woman's only toilet, being in a women only changing room, women only refuge, women who are behind bars, being in women only prisons. These are really very hospital wards and the like. These are very vital. They are needs and they are long fought for and hard fought for rights that women have. And the reason why we want to be in those spaces is because, oh, what a surprise, we are at risk of predatory men. And it's very difficult to
And
tell which
privacy.
ones are the predatory ones and which ones aren't, which is why we keep all of them out.
And it's privacy as well, both for men
Yeah.
and women, but as you say, most especially for women. And if you allow some few men in, you say that there are special men,
Yeah.
the special men who have a certificate saying that they're women, or the special men who've had surgery on their genitals. Well, we can't ask people to show us their certificates
Yes.
or check their pants before letting them in. If you allow any men in, you have to allow all men in
Yeah.
because we cannot tell which ones they are. So it all makes total sense. And we had a petition 18 months ago. We started our petition, which got 110,000 signatures. It was debated last year in Westminster Hall. More than a dozen MPs spoke in favour of it. And we've been trying to get attention to it. And to be fair to Kemi, she really
Yeah.
has tried very hard too. So it's frustrating, yes, to see this coming up now. And it's also frustrating to see Labour say that this isn't a real issue, that it's a culture war.
Oh,
Look,
yes.
if you
Yeah.
come and take away women's rights, then you're the one who's fighting the culture war. We're just asking for our rights back.
Yeah, that's the thing that I find most frustrating, that this is just a Tory starting a culture war. But that said, and I have spoken to cabinet ministers about this, I'm very frustrated that, they know this is an issue. They know they should have dealt with this. I think they deliberately wanted to keep this, some of them. I don't think Kemi, Ben, and I think she has been genuinely a staunch fighter on this issue. But I think the likes of Rishi Sunak and many others, they thought this is going to be a good dividing line between the Tories and Labour. So we'll keep this as an election battleground issue because that will stir up our supporters. But I remember saying to a cabinet minister at an event, you need to get this legislation in now to protect. You're talking about protecting children. This is, you can't make this just. This is about lives. This is literally about people's safety. This can't be a game for you. I wish they'd listened. But again, lots of MPs on lots of different sides suddenly discovering this is an issue. Like when the Cass report was published on the Tavistock and all the puberty blockers given to children. If you'd spent 20 minutes on Google, you would know how big and serious the issues were. But apparently they all just discovered it that day.
Well, what matters now is going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no point in crying over spilt milk here. We're launching a website today and a campaign today, Julia. So you're the first person we've told about this. It's
Excellent.
called Stand Up for Single Sex Services. So sometime today we'll have a website live. We'll have materials with questions that you can ask candidates from every party, whether they stand up for single sex services, and we explain why this matters, what the law actually says, because my goodness,
Yeah.
the misrepresentation of the law is horrifying on every side. And it's not just a Conservative Conservative or a Labour issue. It's
No.
for all candidates going forward. We want to see Labour pick this up as well as the Conservatives. And by the way, why not the Lib Dems too? Everyone says they
the
care about
Greens.
women's
Well,
rights.
everybody should pick up. This is about protecting women and girls. And if you want to stand as a party and say we're not bothered about the safety of women and girls, that's quite a statement. And I think we should know. But I think a lot of people would say a plague on a lot of these parties' houses on this. But here's the thing. This is, I mean, in terms of where we go forward, the law is very clear already, in my view, but people have decided to misinterpret the word gender to mean something in what someone thinks as opposed to what the gen. We used to use sex and gender interchangeably, didn't we? And that's the problem with the Equality Act. It uses the language that we used to have until a little group of trans activists decided to completely change the meaning of these words. And we just need to get back to the reality is that, girls, schools should provide single-sex toilets for girls and boys. Changing rooms should be single-sex. Prisons should be single-sex. You have a right, if you've been abused and, physically abused as a woman, to ask for only women to be in the room when you're talking about what's happened when you're in counselling or on a refuge. I mean, this is such basic stuff. And I am absolutely astounded that we have to have this conversation in 2024.
It's because we keep centering the rights of a tiny number of men who identify as women. I'm sorry for those men, and I want them to be able to live full public lives, be able to go into spaces that are suitable for them. But the great majority of people do not identify as trans. And we've forgotten about actual women in our worries about, well, I think that's just not going to happen. So we've forgotten about the rights of actual women, and actual women need to be able to say no to men who identify as women. And it's not saying that those men are predators or bad people or anything like that, or that they should be hounded out of public life. It's just saying 50% of humanity is women. We need to think what women need. And that means no men, no matter how they identify, no matter why they identify as trans, in women's spaces. That's the law we need. So it's just clarity on what sex means in the Equality Act, and that will solve nearly all the problems.
Absolutely, and by all means, let's provide, if necessary, where we can, safe spaces for those trans people as well. But again, that doesn't mean they should trample on the rights of women and girls. Always been a fantastic advocate on this, Helen Joyce of Sex Matters. Look forward to that website going up. Stand up for single sex services. Ask your local authority. Ask the local pubs, nightclubs, restaurants. If ask at the school. Make sure your child's school has single-sex toilets. It's really basic stuff. This Sam Armstrong.
Yeah, look, you don't need a single-sex library, but you probably do need a single-sex domestic abuse shelter, a single-sex rape crisis centre.
It's the fact that we even have to have this conversation. We are in a topsy-turvy, mad, crazy world.
Well,
when vast majority of people know all this stuff. And yet the people in charge are just mad.
We are far-right bigots, and so is the rest of the country. And there's a new class of people. They're cleverer than us. They know what they're doing.
They should be in charge.
They will be soon.
11:32 is the time. Coming up, we're going to be